The night I stopped answering my family's calls, my mother showed up at my apartment crying because their entire plan had fallen apart. Not because they missed me, not because they were worried about me, because I was the plan. I was 28, living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment across town, and for most of my adult years, my family treated me like a quiet emergency button. If my younger brother needed rent, they called me. If my older sister had childcare issues, they called me. If dad's car broke down, they called me. If mom needed someone to take her to an appointment, they called me. And every time it was never asked like a favor. It was said like a duty. You know how your brother is. You know your sister has kids. You know your father doesn't like asking people. You know we don't have anyone else. That last line worked on me for years. We don't have anyone else. It made me feel needed. Then it made me feel guilty. Then it made me feel trapped. For a long time, I thought that was just what being the dependable one meant. I had a steady job, no kids, and no huge problems anyone could see from the outside. So I became useful. I paid bills that were not mine. I missed birthdays with friends because someone in my family needed a ride. I canceled dates. I used my savings. I took calls at midnight. And every time I was tired, someone reminded me that family helps family. But the strange part was, when I needed something, everyone suddenly had a reason they could not show up. When I had the flu and asked my sister if she could drop soup at my door, she said she was too busy. When my car battery died outside work, my brother said he had plans. When I moved apartments, my dad said his back hurt. But later that day, I saw photos of him helping my brother set up a new TV. I noticed it. I just kept swallowing it. Because when you grow up as the easy child, you learn to make your pain quiet. The first sign that something was really wrong came on a Friday evening. I had just gotten home from work. I was exhausted. My shoes were still on when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. I let it ring for a second, then answered. She sounded too calm. Not normal calm, planned calm. She asked what I was doing that weekend. I said I was resting. There was a pause. Then she said, "Your sister needs help with the kids tomorrow morning." I said I could not. Another pause. Then she said, "What do you mean you can't?" Not, "Is everything okay?" Not, "Are you busy?" Just, "What do you mean?" I told her I had been working overtime all week, and I needed one quiet weekend. Her voice changed. She said, "It's just a few hours." I said no again. That was the first time I heard disappointment turn into coldness that fast. She said, "Fine," and hung up. I stood in my kitchen with my phone still in my hand, feeling like I had done something terrible by choosing sleep. But what I didn't know yet was that my one no had interrupted something much bigger than a Saturday babysitting favor. The next morning, my sister texted me at 7:12. "Are you coming or not?" "No hello. No please. Just pressure." I replied, "I said I can't today." She sent back a thumbs up. That should have been the end. But 10 minutes later, my brother called, then Dad, then Mom again. I did not answer right away. I stared at the screen as their names popped up one after another, and for the first time, I felt less like a person and more like a shared tool nobody wanted to lose. By noon, I had 12 missed calls. At 1 p.m., my sister sent a long message saying I had embarrassed her, ruined her morning, and made her look bad. That confused me. Look bad to who? I asked her what she meant. She did not reply. Later that night, my brother called again. This time I answered. He sounded irritated. He said, "You could have just helped. Now everyone is stressed." I asked, "Everyone who?" He went quiet. Then he said, "Never mind." That silence stuck with me, because my brother never stopped talking unless he almost said something he was not supposed to say. Over the next week, everything felt different. My family stopped sending normal messages, no casual updates, no jokes, no random photos, only requests. "Can you pick this up? Can you send money until Friday? Can you drive Dad? Can you come by after work? Can you watch the kids? Can you help your brother move some boxes?" Every message had urgency. Every call had a problem. And every time I said I could not, the response got sharper. Mom started saying things like, "You're changing." Dad said, "Don't forget who raised you." My sister said, "Some people get one apartment and start acting above everyone." My brother just stopped speaking to me unless he needed something. The first emotional hit came on a Tuesday night. I had worked almost 11 hours. I got home, reheated leftover pasta, and sat down for the first time all day. Then Dad called. He needed me to drive across town and pick him up from a friend's place because he did not want to wait for a ride. I said I was too tired. He sighed and said, "You used to be better than this." That line went through me slowly, not louder than the others, not cruel in an obvious way, just heavy. You used to be better than this. Better meant available. Better meant silent. Better meant useful. I looked at my cold food and realized I did not know the last time anyone in my family asked how I was doing without needing something right after. That night, I muted the family group chat. I thought it would give me peace. Instead, it made me notice how loud the silence felt. 2 days later, I went to my parents' house after work because Mom said she had something important to discuss. When I walked in, my sister was there. My brother was there too. Dad sat at the dining table with his arms crossed. It looked less like a family visit and more like a meeting I had not been warned about. Mom told me to sit. I stayed standing. She said they were worried about my attitude. My sister said I had become selfish. My brother said I was making things harder for everyone. Dad said I needed to remember that families do not work if one person decides to step away. I asked, "Step away from what?" Nobody answered. And that was when I felt it again. That hidden thing. That missing piece. They were not angry because I had missed one favor. They were angry because I had stopped playing a role they had built plans around. Then Mom said something that made the whole room feel smaller. She said, "We've all been counting on you." I asked, "For what?" My sister looked at Mom. My brother looked down. Dad rubbed his forehead. And Mom said, "This isn't the right time." I left 5 minutes later. But that sentence followed me all the way home. "We've all been counting on you." For what? The answer came from someone I did not expect. My sister's oldest kid messaged me on Friday night. They were 14, smart, quiet, and usually stayed out of adult drama. The message said, "Are you moving into Grandma's house?" I stared at it. Then I typed, "What do you mean?" They replied, "Mom said you were going to move in and help with Grandma and Grandpa so we could move into your apartment." For a moment, I did not move. My apartment? I read the message again and again, thinking I had misunderstood. Then another message came. "They said since you don't have kids, it makes more sense." That was the moment my stomach dropped. I called my sister. She did not answer. I called Mom. No answer. I called Dad. No answer. Then I opened the family group chat I had muted. There were messages from earlier that week I had not seen. My sister had written, "He needs to stop acting difficult. The apartment plan only works if he agrees." My brother replied, "He'll come around. He always does." Mom wrote, "Don't push him too hard yet." Dad wrote, "We should talk after Sunday dinner." I sat there staring at the screen, and the whole past month snapped into place. The babysitting, the moving boxes, the pressure, the sudden anger. They had been planning around me, not with me, around me. The next day I went to my parents' house again. This time I did not wait to be invited in. Everyone was there. My sister looked annoyed the second she saw me. Mom looked nervous. Dad looked like he already knew this would be bad. I asked one question. "Were you planning for me to move out of my apartment?" Nobody spoke. That was enough, but I wanted to hear it, so I asked again. Mom started carefully. She said my parents were getting older. She said the house had extra space. She said my sister's lease was ending. She said rent was too high. She said my apartment was close to the kids' school. She said it just made sense. Then my sister jumped in and said, "You live alone. You don't need that place the way we do." My brother added, "And I was going to take the basement room once you moved in with Mom and Dad." I looked at him. "So you were getting a room too?" He shrugged. "It was just an idea." It was not just an idea. It was a full plan. My sister would take my apartment. My brother would move into part of my parents' house. I would move back home, take care of my parents, drive them around, help with bills, and somehow be grateful that everyone had found a use for me. And nobody had asked me, not once. The worst part was not even the plan itself. It was how normal they made it sound. Like my independence was a spare item on a shelf. Like my home was available because they wanted it. Like my time, money, and future belonged to the family first. And to me only if there was anything left. I asked Mom, when were you planning to tell me? She looked down and said, after we figured out the details. That broke something in me. Quietly, no shouting, no dramatic speech, just a clean break inside my chest. I said, you figured out my details without me. My sister rolled her eyes and said, you're being sensitive. That was when I finally stopped trying to make them understand. I said, I'm not moving. My apartment is mine. My weekends are mine. My money is mine. And from now on, I'm not the backup plan. My dad stood up and said, don't talk to us like we're strangers. I said, then stop treating me like storage. Nobody had a response to that. I left. And this time, when the call started, I did not answer. Mom called 9 times that night. My sister sent messages calling me cruel. My brother said I was making everyone's situation worse. Dad left one voicemail saying I would regret turning my back on family. I deleted it before it finished. For the next 2 weeks, I answered no calls from them. I replied only once in writing. I will talk when the conversation is respectful and does not include demands. They hated that. Because written boundaries cannot be interrupted, the consequences came fast. My sister had to renew her lease at a higher rate. My brother had to stay with a friend for a while because the basement idea depended on me moving back. My parents had to arrange paid rides for appointments instead of assuming I would leave work. And suddenly, the family that said they had no one else found other options. That part hurt in a new way, because it showed me they were capable. They just preferred me because I was free, familiar, and easy to guilt. A month later, Mom came to my apartment. That was the night from the beginning. She stood outside my door crying, saying everything had become difficult. I opened the door, but I did not let her step inside. She said my sister was overwhelmed. She said my brother was angry. She said my dad felt disrespected. Then she said, we need you. For years, that sentence would have pulled me back in. But that night, I heard what it really meant. We need you to give up your peace. We need you to make our lives easier. We need you to shrink again. I told her I loved her, but I was not moving home. I was not giving anyone my apartment. I was not paying bills I had not agreed to. I was not answering emergency calls that were only emergencies because no one planned ahead. She cried harder. I felt bad. Of course I did. I am not made of stone. But feeling bad did not mean I had to walk back into the same place that kept hurting me. After that, things changed. Not in a perfect way. My sister barely talks to me. My brother only messages on holidays. Dad is polite but distant. Mom calls sometimes, and when she starts steering the conversation toward favors, I end the call. At first, the quiet felt like punishment. Then it started feeling like air. I slept better. I saved money. I saw friends again. I spent Sundays doing nothing and did not feel guilty for every minute. Sometimes I still miss the version of my family I wanted them to be. But I do not miss being used. I do not miss checking my phone with dread. I do not miss being praised only when I was useful. The hardest lesson was realizing that some families do not lose you in one big fight. They lose you every time they make your needs smaller than everyone else's. And by the time you stop answering, you are not leaving them behind. You are finally coming back to yourself.